Welcome to the Weather Farm, where we have the weather for the continental United States, including the severe weather threatened to central plains on our Monday. We have your temperatures region by region later in this forecast, so let's dive right into the details. As we begin our Monday, we are watching an area of disturbed weather across the northern plains. This is bringing heavy rain across parts of Montana into Wyoming, into the Dakotas. There's even some cold air mixing into some of those higher elevations. We could see a mix with some freezing rain and some sleet. Across the Pacific Northwest, we have a system moving onshore, bringing rain along the coast. And in those highest of elevations, we are seeing snowfall. Not significant snowfall, maybe up to a few inches of snow, but it is a sign that there is some colder air aloft in that part of the country. And in the Northeast, we're watching that low pressure system continue to move off to the north and east. It is bringing light rain showers across far northern New England to begin our Monday. As we put our map into motion, we're going to watch the southern central plains because by noontime, we're starting to see a few storms popping across parts of Arkansas, Texas, and Oklahoma. In fact, the Storm Prediction Center has gone ahead and highlighted eastern Oklahoma for a moderate risk of severe weather for our day on our Monday. Elsewhere, from Kansas to Missouri, Arkansas, down into the Dallas Metroplex area, you are under an enhanced risk for severe weather. Now, in terms of the types of weather we're going to see, we have the greatest chance of tornadoes in eastern Oklahoma on our Monday. We have a 10% chance elsewhere that does include the Dallas Metroplex area. And in both of these yellow and red areas, those are hatched. So any tornadoes that develop, the Storm Prediction Center believes that those could be significant tornadoes. So it's something we are definitely going to be watching here at the Weather Farm. In terms of our hail, it's those same areas that we have the concern for significant hail. But if you look, that hatched area also now goes up into eastern Nebraska, southwestern Iowa, a little bit farther down into Texas. So this is an indication that we could have hail in excess of 2 to 3 inches in size with these storms as they roll through on our Monday. Something definitely to be concerned about if you're not under the tornado watch. But the big story is also going to be the strong winds. And those are going to move eastward through Missouri toward the St. Louis area Monday night into early Tuesday morning. So let's go back to our map and watch this play out. Again, this is about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So as we go through the day, about 5 o'clock, we're starting to see a line of storms forming near Kansas City down towards southern Oklahoma into Texas. Out ahead of it, we're seeing some scattered showers really due to the daytime heating, not associated with this particular line of storms. But let's go and continue to put it into motion. By 8 o'clock, those storms are moving through eastern Oklahoma into Missouri, up towards Iowa, and even southern Minnesota. Out across far southeastern South Dakota and northeastern Nebraska, you could get a rumble or two of thunder by the time we get to 8 p.m. And overnight, the storms are going to lose their severe characteristics as they continue to move east. A lot of this has to do with the drier air that is in place with these northwesterly winds. We can see these pressure lines coming from northwest to southeast, and winds typically are geostrophic to the pressure line. So we have a lot of westerly and southwesterly winds bringing in drier air. So that's going to limit the severe potential for the Great Lakes as these storms continue to move east. But it's going to bring heavy amounts of rain as we go into Tuesday morning, 5 a.m., about 8 a.m., and then over the day on Tuesday, we're going to watch heavy rain across the Ohio Valley and back through the Dakotas, Minnesota, and Wisconsin as the low is sitting across parts of Iowa. And as that system continues to move through, we could see a refiring of some severe weather across Indiana and then along parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, and down through Alabama on our day Tuesday. In fact, if we look at the day 2 categorical map, the Storm Prediction Center has the greatest chance of severe weather from places like Bowling Green down to Nashville. So that's something we're definitely going to watch as these lines do form through. The thing that we're going to have to watch is as that rain comes through from the morning, does it stabilize the atmosphere enough so that these afternoon storms don't fire up and they don't become as severe? I think the greatest chance of destabilization is going to be along the Great Lakes. Down along the southeast, I think you have the greater chance of seeing severe weather for your Tuesday. And what's causing all this severe weather, especially on our Monday? Well, let's put our jet stream map into motion here. And so we're going to watch this system. We're going to watch this jet stream. It's making this dip of Four Corners region as we begin our Monday. And as we put that into motion, as we go into Monday afternoon, we're starting to see this storm take a negative tilt by the time we get to 8 p.m. on our Monday. And where we see this negative tilt and we see this divergence here, we can see with the pressure lines As air parcels rush through the jet stream, they get to the valley of the jet stream. Then some are diverging up into the Central Plains, while others are diverging out across the Tennessee Valley. So where we have that strong divergence, and that's what this map is indicating, that's where we have the greater chance of severe weather. A negatively tilted trough means that storms are intensifying, or the air parcels are accelerating and the storm is intensifying in that exit region. And where we have that great divergence, pressures aloft are decreasing, and what it's doing, Mother Nature likes to balance itself out. So if pressure is decreasing in those higher levels of the atmosphere, it's increasing at the surface. And that is making that surface low a lot stronger, and the storms have a lot more rotation and intensity than they normally would have. So let's watch this jet stream. We go through the night on Monday into Tuesday, still negatively tilted. That's why we believe that we have the greatest chance here across this area. But by the time we get to Tuesday, that jet stream kind of flattens out as those storms make their way into the Ohio and Tennessee Valley. In fact, across the southeast, we really don't see much of a buckle in the jet stream or a negative tilt to that jet stream. So that's why we believe that the threat is going to be a lot less as we make our day Wednesday into Thursday. In terms of our supercell composite, again, this takes all kinds of values: the CAPE, the relative helicities, the wind shear. It aggregates them all together and gives us a parameter. And so when we start seeing those yellows, that's where we have the likelihood of the greatest chance of supercells developing. And so we see as we go into the afternoon on Monday, that is centered here across parts of Oklahoma down into Texas, and especially overnight. The storms kind of fade out. But then by the day on Tuesday, we really don't see those refiring much. Maybe a little bit here in far western Mississippi, but the threat isn't as great with this system on our Tuesday. In our CAPE values, the amount of instability, again, it's strong across parts of Texas and Oklahoma as we begin our Monday. That moves further north, and that's really going to start accelerating those storms. CAPE values 4,000, 5,000 joules, even towards Arkansas. But you can clearly see this line here from South Dakota down through Kentucky. And what's really causing that is we see a lot of dry air. And if we look at the dew points here, we see that the dew points are in the 60s and 70s here, very rich moisture in the air that's going to help fuel those storms. But across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, dew points are in the 40s and 50s, not really conducive to severe weather across this area. So it's one of the reasons we believe that those severe weather storms are going to have trouble maintaining their intensity as they move into the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. But we could see, as we go through the day Tuesday, a little bit of refiring, especially in the afternoon. We see this line, and this is the cold front. This is the dry line moving through, and that's going to, again, lower those dew points. If we jump back to our dew point map here, we're going to see that here along this line, we have a little nose that's nudging north towards Evansville of dew points in the 70s. Indianapolis, you're approaching the 60s for your dew points. So we have this area of warm, moist air, but right behind it, dew points are crashing into the 40s and 50s. And we can watch this as we continue through the day on our Tuesday into Tuesday evening. That drier air is beginning to move in, and our storm threat is going to be much lower. So let's take a look at our radar as we go forward. This is the South Central Plains. We're going to watch this area of storms as we develop across Oklahoma. As we get to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to start to see discrete supercells starting to fire. And again, if these remain discrete, that increases the risk of severe weather and tornadoes because those cells are able to feed off of all the available energy. When they start congealing into a line, that energy gets spread out across all the storms in that line. So we're going to watch those discrete cells continue to fire up across Kansas. Again, the storms are kind of forming into a line. We don't believe the severe threat is going to be as great across that area. But then another round starts to form back behind it as we get to about 7, 8 o'clock on our Monday evening. All this heavy rain moves through Missouri into Illinois and to Arkansas overnight Monday into Tuesday. And by Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday morning, all the severe weather is out of the South Central Plains. As we jump towards the Ohio and Tennessee valleys, this is our Monday morning. We're going to watch those storms that came out of the plains on Sunday dive to the south and east, and they're going to run into that drier air. So they're not really going to have the ability to maintain their strength. But it's as we go Monday night, here come those storms out of Kansas and Oklahoma. Again, it's kind of formed into a line here, especially across parts of Missouri. So we don't believe you're going to have severe weather threat with tornadoes that you saw on Friday. But we're going to watch those heavy rains move through Illinois, Indiana. And down, we start to see a couple lines starting to form here as we get to Tuesday morning. But mainly the big threat is going to be heavy amounts of rain, strong winds, and thunder across the Ohio Valley. As we go through the day on Tuesday, This is about 10 a.m. We see that first area of precipitation moving out. So if we get enough sunlight, if we get enough energy from the afternoon sun, could we fire up another round of storms? And this model wants to believe so, especially in southern Indiana down through Kentucky. A lot of discrete cells are starting to pop by about 3 or 4 in the afternoon. That's going to go into Tuesday evening, and we're going to start to see a little bit more heavy rain across Indiana and Ohio, but down across Nashville, down to northern Mississippi and Alabama, we're going to see a lot of discrete individual cells. And those are things that we're going to have to watch on our Tuesday for the threat of severe weather. That continues to move off towards the East Coast, and by Wednesday morning, it's moved off into Virginia and into the Carolinas. In terms of our temperatures for our Monday, it's going to be 70s and 80s in the ahead of that system, 90s and hundreds across parts of Texas, across the northern plains where you're under that low pressure and you have those northwesterly winds moving in. Temperatures are going to be in the 30s and 40s. As we move towards our Tuesday, we're going to still see that cooler weather across the northern tier of the United States, 40s for your afternoon highs, 60s, 70s across the northeast, and then 70s and 80s across the southeast and Tennessee valleys to help funnel those or fuel those thunderstorms for our Tuesday. Out in the desert, we're starting to warm up with temperatures approaching 100, and that trend is going to continue as we go into the week. But the thing we're going to notice here across the northern tier into the Great Lakes, by the time we get to Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we're going to have a northwesterly flow of wind, and that's going to bring some very cool across this area as we approach the Memorial Day weekend. So as we go into Thursday, we're going to see temperatures generally in the 40s, 50s, and approaching 60 across the Dakotas by the time we get to Friday. And out in the desert southwest, you're warming up with your temperatures. Taking a look region by region, 40s and 50s across most of New England for our Monday, with a slight warming into the 50s and 60s as we begin our Tuesday. Rainfall estimates over the next 48 hours will be heaviest in western Pennsylvania, 1 to 2 inches, but generally it's going to be if you get under the right thunderstorm for your chances of precipitation. As we look into the southeast, it's 80s and 90s, especially across Florida for our Monday, and it's pretty much a repeat pattern as we make our way into Tuesday. In terms of precipitation, as those storms continue to move through, generally half an inch of precipitation for Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama. Out toward Arkansas and Oklahoma, you could see slightly higher amounts of rain. For the south central plains, it's going to be 90s and low 100s across Texas, 80s across Louisiana and Mississippi. Look here across New Mexico, though. We do have a little bit of cooler weather, 50s and 60s up in northern New Mexico and warming into the 70s and 80s across the south. As we make our way to Tuesday, those temperatures are kind of spreading out, 70s and 80s widespread, and the real warmth is really contained into far southern Texas. In terms of precipitation, where we get those under those storms in eastern Oklahoma into Arkansas, southeastern Missouri, we could see 2 to 3, 4 inches of rainfall, but likely most areas are going to see less than a half of an inch by the time we get to Wednesday afternoon. Across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, it's 50s and 60s to the north, 70s and 80s across the Ohio Valley. And as we make our way into Tuesday, temperatures are going to continue to cool across the northern tier, 30s and 40s, 50s for Michigan, but 60s and 70s across the lower Ohio Valley. In terms of our precipitation, we're going to see that low as it moves into Iowa sit and spin, and that's going to create heavy amounts of rain for southern Minnesota into the Dakotas and for Wisconsin. Widespread 1 to 3 inches of rain are likely in this area. Out ahead of the front by Wednesday evening, we could see half an inch to an inch across most areas. Temperatures across the northern plains are going to be cool for this time of the year. 30s and 40s across the Dakotas and Montana for our Monday, 50s and 60s across Iowa. And as we make our way to Tuesday, that cold air continues to move into the Great Lakes, widespread 40s and 50s across the Dakotas, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Temperatures being held down across parts of Iowa into the 40s and 50s. And again, as we mentioned, the heaviest amounts of rain are going to fall across parts of Iowa and Minnesota. Looking at the desert southwest for our Monday, the deserts, you're warming to the mid 90s, near 100 degrees. California, LA, you're in the low 80s for your afternoon highs. Parts of Nevada, you're in the 40s and 50s. A little bit cooler in those higher elevations. Southern Oregon, you're in the 60s for your Monday highs. As we make our way to Tuesday, a general warming trend is in store. The deserts are really going to surge into the low 100s to mid 100s for your afternoon highs. And the big thing is we're not going to see much in the way of precipitation across this area over the next 48 hours. Across the Pacific Northwest, temperatures are in the 50s and 60s for the most part for your Monday. Across British Columbia, where we have that rain and snow in those highest elevation, temperatures are going to be held down in the 30s and 40s across most of British Columbia. As we make our way to Alberta, though, we're going to start to see temperatures in the 50s and 60s. 50s and 60s for Montana, Idaho, and eastern Washington, as well as Oregon. In terms of our precipitation, again, the highest precip amounts are going to be in British Columbia, where we can see up to an inch of rain. As we get into those higher elevations, that snowfall, 6 to 8, maybe 10 inches, are going to be likely. And that rainfall along the coast could amount up to a quarter to a half an inch as we make our way down into Oregon. Well, we thank you for joining us here at the Weather Farm. We hope you have a wonderful Monday. Stay safe. Watch out if you're in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri for the threat of severe weather, heavy rains across the northern plains, and we will see you again on Wednesday.